Welcome to the Back in Business podcast. We're a team of business journalists, small business people and freelance contractors who are back in business and aiming to help others, particularly enterprising young people, to get back in business. We believe that small business and freelancers are the backbone of the UK economy and that more needs to be done to help the approximately 6 million in total of them. And we want to hear from you. We want your stories, we want your experiences, we want to know the truth about how your business or your contracts are coping with the virus outbreak. You'll find much more on the website. That's backinbusiness.org.uk. There's no G in backing, so it's backinbusiness.org.uk. Join us, tell us your stories. It's the stories that count, they stick, and they make the important points. I'm Liz Barclay and I'm joined by Mickey Clark. Mickey, things are a bit confusing for businesses and freelancers at the minute, given all the schemes that the government has announced in the last month. What's going on?
Well, there's no problem unless you've got a crystal ball. I mean, you get it all sorted. That's the only way you'll follow what's going on. They seem to know how long we're going to be coming out of the economic maelstrom, but they're not quite sure when we're going to come out of lockdown. And I'm not quite sure how you can separate the two. But I think confusion, just like we had over Brexit for 3 years, is causing problems for businesses because they don't know what problems they face and what decisions they have to make. We've got the same now with the lockdown. And let's face it, there's going to be a lot of casualties, whichever way we cut it. And is life going to really be the same as it was before the lockdown? And that's the problem businesses face.
But are we already seeing businesses having gone down the tubes?
Well, there was two last week, Oasis and Warehouse retailers that went to the wall. That should come as no surprise. You got Richard Branson going around with a poor hat now. I mean, who would have thought that? He's got more money than me. The airline industry is in a terrible state. So, yeah, I think you're going to see a few casualties, and some of them are going to be really eye-watering.
I saw figures yesterday from the Resolution Foundation that showed that 25% of businesses are shut. There's a vast raft of about 60% that are saying we've had a reduction in revenue coming in, but those 25%, it's possible they'll never open again.
No, that's right. And I think they're saying that on the high street today, that, there are shops that are just never going to reopen again. Some that have got stores but feel they're better off going online. Others that are not going to operate at all. Oasis and Warehouse being a classic example. But, don't blame it all on COVID. Some are just badly run businesses and some are in sectors such as retail where there's been a headwind coming for some time.
So tell us how it really is out there. Email us. The email address is contact@backinbusiness.org.uk. That's contact us at backinbusiness.org.uk. Visit the website, find us on LinkedIn, or we're on Twitter at business_backin. No G. Business_backin. No G.
And of course, one of the features will be our business editor, Declan Curry. I laughed when I heard this, and I argued against it, but I got overruled. So we're going to have to listen to what he says on a fairly regular basis. But I'm sure he'll come out with some sense after all these years. Told him everything I knew, and he still knows nothing. Declan.
Your fault.
That's because everything you taught me was utterly forgettable from the moment it left your mouth.
What are you going to be talking about?
Well, I'm going to take a look at some of the help that is available out there for businesses that are doing their best to keep going during these difficult times. There are loans, there are grants, there's all sorts of help with tax, with wages, with sick pay. There's different schemes depending on whether you're a large business, a medium-sized business, a small business, a micro business, a tech business. It's quite the array of help out there, Mickey. To give the government credit, they've rolled this out at huge scale in record time. So praise where it's due for making all this help available. But it is a bit of a maze, and we'll do our best to guide people through it and point them in the right direction.
Yeah, as you say, the government have put a lot of money together, but of course they're printing most of it. It won't go through on the balance sheet. the damage will come, of course, when a lot of those loans don't get paid back.
Yeah, and that's where the government guarantees come in, the guarantees from the government to the banks that if they loan money to businesses, they won't be left entirely on the hook for the whole lot. For large and for medium-sized businesses, the government is guaranteeing to repay 80% of the loans if the borrower defaults, though it is still the responsibility of the original borrower to pay back what they can. For micro businesses, Mickey, for really small businesses that only want to borrow a few £1,000s, then the government stepped in with a wholly new scheme on this, where they guarantee to repay 100% of the money. That's largely because a lot of the high street banks were looking at the really small companies and saying, you know what, a £2,000 loan is barely worth us issuing the paperwork for in terms of our system. So we're not even going to do it. Some of the high street banks weren't offering those types of loans at all. They will now be live within the next couple of days.
So is it enough, or is it still a one-size-fits-all situation?
They've tried to vary it as much as you can, but you're right. There are always winkles with schemes like this where certain people, certain businesses will fall through the net. So you've got to look very carefully at the guidance that's been published by the government on the different websites. There are different rules and regulations and criteria depending on where you are in the country. Northern Ireland has slightly different rules from Wales, has slightly different rules from Scotland, which are different from England. So if you're in the nations of this United Kingdom, it's probably a good idea to look at your own government website, the Scotland government website, the Wales government website, the website for the executive in Northern Ireland, just to see what's different depending on where you are.
So not just a pretty face, Liz.
But then again, let's not go there. Thank you, Declan. Thank you so much for that. Now, Declan sent me through a very comprehensive list of all the schemes last night. I am going to make sure that those are on the website. We've already got all those government sites, links to those that Declan mentioned. So come along to the website and you'll find a lot more information. That's backinbusiness.org.uk. Thank you, Declan. And let's talk a bit more about freelancers. Simon McVicker, our Director of Policy and Communications at Back in Business, is with us. Simon McVicker, what are freelance workers telling you?
Well, hello, Liz. I think, at the moment, there's great uncertainty in the freelance community. The government scheme, I think the Chancellor has done his best to cover most freelancers, but I think he's fallen into the trap that a lot of people do when they're looking at the freelance community. He doesn't quite get the diversity in the freelance community, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for freelancers. However, the scheme he has brought in will cover the 3.5 million sole traders, and when this money begins to come through in June, and that's 2 months really since the lockdown, these people should be okay if they can survive that alone. But people now, and there's reports been done by universities and other institutes saying there's going to be something like 1 in 5 freelancers, 750,000 people, who are going to be left high and dry. There's going to be no schemes at all for them. And this is going to hit certain sectors, very, very important sectors. There's going to be a lot of young people hit by this, people who are taking an entrepreneurial risk to go out on their own. It's going to hit people in their 50s and 60s who have decided to move into consultancy later on in their career using their expert base, and also mothers returning to the workplace. These numbers of mothers returning to the workplace have gone through the roof in recent years. I think a lot of women find this a very good solution going into self-employment. But because these people are not able to show trading accounts for the last 3 years, they cannot claim any of the government's benefits. Also, a lot of these consultant people are running limited companies, one-person limited companies. Some people call them PSC, personal service companies. And in those companies, you employ yourself, and quite a lot of them don't take salaries. They pay themselves in dividends. And the government has really just ignored these. And they don't like this type of vehicle anyway, as they've proven in the IR35 changes, and they've left these people high and dry. And Manchester Metropolitan University is saying in their report that these groups I mentioned, they're potentially devastating for these groups. They're going to be left high and dry.
Simon, if they are left high and dry, I mean, this is people like you and me we're talking about, and Mickey and Declan. We're all freelance, self-employed people. If you are in that situation then where you've got no other source of income, your contracts have dried up, you're going to fall back on the government's welfare benefit scheme, the Universal Credit Scheme, and that's not easy to get either.
No, and I mean a lot of the people I'm talking about are probably at the higher income end anyway, and whether they qualify for some of these government schemes, I don't know. The one thing I will say is, if we look at the last big crash in 2008, 2009, the one thing that happened there was big companies were very reluctant to employ people for quite a few years after that, and they turned to contractors and freelancers as a stopgap measure. And so therefore there may be, in the sort of medium term, a bounce back in freelancing, but you've got to survive until then, and that may not be for a year or two. But that's the only silver lining I can see.
Okay, Simon, I know you're going to be keeping an eye on this as we go through this whole crisis, come out the other side. Declan's going to be keeping an eye on what the government's up to and what these schemes are that are coming on board. We'll be hearing from you frequently on the podcast. Thank you very much indeed. But please, we want to hear your story. You are the business people. You are the people who are freelance. We want to hear how you're coping through the crisis. Contact us at backinbusiness.org.uk. That's the email address, or find us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Now, one of the sectors that's worst hit by the COVID-19 lockdown is hospitality. We all know that the pubs are closed at the minute, and no one's missing them more than Mickey. But I have to say, Mickey, I think your waistline is improving. Or am I not seeing properly through this Zoom screen?
Declan's laughing. Why are you laughing?
So am I. But I tell you what, for publicans, this isn't a laughing matter.
No, I know. I haven't seen my feet for years, and that's mainly due to publicans. Now, I've never met Jenny Bache, but she sounds like a woman that I could really get to know better. She's the missus of the barley mowing Maidenhead. Morning, Jenny.
Good morning, Mickey.
How are you?
I'm not too bad.
Tell us about you and your pub, because I love the name Barley Mow. It's an old-fashioned, traditional name.
It is.
But about the business and the pub itself, are you a tenant, a landlord, manager, freehold?
Yeah, we have the free. Well, we are with Enterprise Inns, which is now part of Stonegate. We've had it for 10 years, and we went free of tie last July, so we can buy our beer where we like.
And that's a big boon to you, isn't it? As,
Massively.
To be able to buy your beer at the price you want and sell it at the price you want.
Absolutely.
Rather than be dictated to by some landlord who hasn't got a clue.
And it made a massive difference to our business. Massive difference.
And I suppose when the lockdown came, it was abrupt, to say the least. A lot of pubs have complained, breweries as well, of having to tip beer away. Has that been the case with you?
Yeah, I've just been in the cellar. We've got 19 barrels, which are all now going out of date. We had one of the local brewers come the other day and tip it in front of me down the drain, which pretty much broke my heart.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know that one of the pub in the next village to us, I know the landlady in there quite well, and she's offering beer in these big milk bottle 4-litre jobs at £2.50 a pint. Is it because it's off sales that you don't pay the duty so much on it?
No, you have to pay the duty when you buy it. It's in when you buy it from the brewer.
Oh, right. So she's doing it. I mean, she's generating business and taking a big hit, because normally she'd be charging her at £4.
Absolutely, but and anything's worth having than nothing, I guess.
On day one, when they closed you down, what was your immediate reaction after the initial fear and losing most of your breakfast?
Yeah.
I mean, what was the initial problems that you feared most, and what actually transpired?
It was just so scary. I mean, the day that's on the Saturday morning, obviously we closed Friday night. The Saturday morning, the bill turned up for the rent for the next quarter. So I had a bill in front of me for £18,500. and it's still racking up weekly.
And they're still charging you, even though the premises are not open, and you've been instructed by the government of the land to keep it closed.
Yeah, still.
How do they justify that?
They won't speak to us. The person that we had from Enterprise, they're furloughed, and all we've had is emails just saying we won't. The last one was that they aren't going to collect it. They're still charging it, and you can pay it when it's open, but at that sort of rate, if it goes, 6 months, it'll be under.
So you don't actually know if that money's going to fall due at some point, or whether they're saying to you, well, we're going to charge you, but we're not going to collect it, so we'll forget about it.
No, they are saying they are going to collect it at the moment.
But not at a reduced rate, because you're not getting the full benefit.
They're not getting any.
And you're not getting any service back up from them, are you?
No, nothing at all. And the insurance companies aren't paying out on the closure either.
Have you tried your insurance
Yes,
company? Because I know dentists are going through. They're threatening to sue insurance companies because they reckon about 2,000 are about to go bust because the insurers haven't paid out on those premiums.
Exactly the same for the pub industry. A lot of pubs are all getting together and making group claims.
And what about business rates? Because I know that's a big bone of contention with many landlords. When you talk to an ex-landlord whose pub's gone bust, they'll often say to you, it was the business rates what done it. They tipped us over the edge. Are you still being charged business rates?
No, there's no business rates now.
How long is that for?
For the whole of next year, up till next month.
Whole of next year? So it will resume again in 2021. I mean, that's 2021. That must be a bit of comfort for you.
Absolutely, but we still haven't got anything to pay. We've still got no income coming in. We've still got to pay the rent, and that is the crippling thing at the moment.
So no revenue. I mean, have you applied? Even if you apply to the government for a loan,
we tried that.
What, they turned you down?
Yeah.
How did you go about it? Through the banks?
Through the bank, yeah.
And the bank just rejected you?
They rejected it.
Was that because you had no assets?
No, I don't know. There was no explanation. It was just, we're sorry, but you didn't qualify. But I guess the accounts that we put in were under the Tide model. Well, not many pubs under a Tide model make money.
I can see the point. I mean, do you feel aggrieved by the banks and their actions? Because they'll defend themselves and say, well, we've got a fiduciary duty to shareholders to make sure that we don't give out money that's going to, not come back to us. Or do you think that they could have been a bit more flexible?
I feel very upset, to be honest, about it. I did it on my own because the accountants wanted quite a lot of money, and I am a chartered accountant by trade. So I thought I did it on my own. But it was there was no explanation. That's the thing. There was no contact. You can't ring anybody. It was just an email saying tough. That's it.
And when you made the app, you just made an application online and got a rejection online.
I had made the application online. They sent me 2 spreadsheets to fill out, a cash flow and a personal expenditure spreadsheet, and I sent that back, and then just a no.
Well, it still astonishes me. I mean, in the old days, it would be at least a bank manager standing there to take the flak, but there
was no contact at all, which is devastating.
Yeah, well, keep your fingers crossed and, pedal as hard as you can. Jenny Bache there. Absolutely. From the barley mow in Maidenhead. I mean, Liz, it's a classic story, isn't it?
Mickey, I'm just astonished that there's no way of having that interaction and saying, why have we been turned down? What do we need to do? Is there something else that we could fill in and come back on? But I suspect that this is not that Jenny is not alone. And Jenny, we will hear from you as the series goes on, because obviously we're at the start of it rather than at the end of it. Nobody's expecting the pubs to be open again this year. So,
well, on that basis, 80% of the pubs in this country won't open again.
Simon,
at the end of it.
Exactly. Simon wants to quickly come in, and I want to come on to Ian Cass in the hospitality industry.
Hello, Jenny. Have you spoken or contacted your local MP about this?
I have, yes. Our local MP is Theresa May, and I think she's probably sick of me, to be honest, because I use it on a basis.
You want a person without some influence.
Well, it would be nice, but I'm still waiting for a reply.
Okay.
Well, it would be really good if you could let us know what she says.
Yeah, we'll come back to
Okay.
Jenny as the series goes on. But let me just talk to Ian Cass from the Forum of Private Business. Ian, you're working really closely with the hospitality sector. In your experience so far, how common is Jenny's experience?
Jenny's experience is a very common one. I know Jenny, so hi, Jenny. Yeah, I guess there's three things that really spring to mind with me. One of them is the hospitality industry has been struggling for a while, particularly the tenants that work for the big pub codes, because you're really tied for everything that you're buying from them. You know, your beer, your crisps, the fruit machine revenue, the lot. So most of those tenants don't make a great deal of money. And they haven't got a lot of choice in what they buy or the prices that they pay. So the industry's been very fragile for a while, and we've been pointing that out to government for, God, you know, Liz, you've heard me going on about this before, probably 4 or 5 years.
I have, yes.
So you're dealing with an industry that really has been quite badly treated by the pub owning companies for a number of years, and it's quite fragile. And we were told by the pub codes that, oh no, everything's fine, everything's rosy in the garden. But unfortunately, this coronavirus, you know, this pandemic has shown just how fragile the business is, and it's putting a lot of people under pressure.
So can you, Ian, can you quantify at this stage what kind of an impact the virus is going to have on that already fragile industry?
Well, yeah, I mean, pubs may well close. You know, Jenny's point is a good one. They were told that they were going to get this 25k grant, and straight away the pub companies saw that as rent for them, not as a means of the pub surviving. It was great, we can get our rent. And the main pub codes, through the British Beer and Pub Association, wrote to the Chancellor and asked that the Chancellor paid the grants directly to the pub companies, not to the pub tenants, so that they could take their rent straight away. They've seen that grant as a means of paying themselves rent, rather than maybe as a wider means of keeping the pub surviving, and that's wrong.
Ian, it's Mickey Clark here. I mean,
yeah,
you're quite right. Everything you've said so far is very familiar to me. I would go so far to say that the tenanted situation in this country is a bust business plan. It always has been. You know, most of these landlords, because that's what they are, property companies would be a better description,
exactly,
almost went bust building up these chains of pubs. They basically can't run a booze up in a brewery. You know, either you're a property company or you're a pub operator. If your Weatherspoon's fine, it's not my sort of pub, but I appreciate he runs a very good outfit. But these are trying to do the two things together, and it doesn't gel, does it?
No, you're so right, and it's government. They still see them as kind of these genial pub operating companies, and a lot of them aren't. They don't brew beer. They are property owning businesses, and you're right. They leveraged when money was cheap. This goes back to 2008 and the crash. They lent. They took on a hell of a lot of debt. You know, Jenny talks about EI going to Stonegate. There's a massive amount of debt still around that business. So you've got these pub operating companies with huge debts. They still have to pay, you know, the interest on those debts, and the only asset they've got is the pubs and the people in them. So they're taking the money, you know, straight away from the tenants as a means of fueling that debt. They're just very inefficiently run businesses. You've articulated it far better than I could, mate.
Declan has got a question for you, Ian.
Yeah.
Well, just to drop in something from the Pubs Code Adjudicator, which is supposedly the regulator for this sector, it says that it has called on the 6 regulated pub owning businesses to demonstrate how they propose to support all their tied tenants through the COVID crisis. The regulator says we've made it clear to pub owning businesses that they must demonstrate a fair and transparent approach. Well, let's see just how many teeth this watchdog has got as this pandemic.
They haven't.
It's called the pub code adjudicator, but he has no adjudication powers. He can only arbitrate, so he can't set precedent. He can't, that's a flawed model in its own right. But the code, what it should have done, the pub code, to try and keep it simple, they'd seen that the power was laying with the pub companies and they were abusing that power. They were allowed to self-regulate. They didn't do it, so they were regulated against. You're not regulated against if you're behaving in a nice, friendly manner. And the pub code was put into place. And a key part of that pub code was that if a pub tenant felt that the tenancy agreement that, was unfair, they weren't happy with that, they had the right to go for something called a market rent only option, where they would pay the property owning company that Mickey refers to. They would pay them a fair rent, and they would basically be able to operate in a free manner and buy whatever products they wanted from wherever they wanted. And that was a key part of the code. But in 4 years, it's never been implemented. I don't believe anybody's actually achieved a market rent only option. That's another story that we could go down, but that certainly doesn't help matters. That was supposed to level the playing field, and it never has. Simple as that.
Ian, I'm just wondering, as a final point here, and we will come back to this because this lot could talk about pubs all day. I quite like them myself. But if we see this pub sector not recovering to any great extent, how much is UK PLC going to lose as a result?
Well, it'll lose a lot of income, and it'll also lose a hell of a lot of jobs, because when you think of it, every small pub probably, employs, cleaner, husband and wife team running it, full-time staff, part-time staff, kitchen staff. So it will be serious, and unfortunately, we're not going to know how many of these tenancies are closed until, the area manager goes in and finds the keys on the doorstep. Can I just add one other quick thing, and I will make it quick? You mentioned the bank loans in there, and I do think that's a big issue, and why the government thought that the big banks, who really have been not supporting small business, they took away the local advisors, local branches. They don't really seem to want small business as customers. Why anybody thought that they'd be able to get these C-bills loans through, which Jenny was talking about going for, is beyond me, because they're really not supporting that at all. They'd have been better going to alternative providers and smaller banks and starter banks and getting them to manage the process rather than relying on the likes of Lloyds and Barclays and people like that.
Ian, there's a whole other discussion there, and again we will come back to it. We'll look at the behaviour of the banks. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. I have to say that's all for this week, but we do want to hear from you. How is your business doing? Not just in the pub sector, but right across all the various sectors. Will you survive? Do you think that the government needs to do more, or is the government getting it right? How is your sector affected? Are you planning to bring back furloughed employees? What are the long-term changes that you think that will have to be made? So email us. The email address again is contact us at backinbusiness.org.uk. Visit the website, find us on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter at business_backin. We want your experiences, your stories, your questions. And next week, join us. We'll be talking to the Shadow Chancellor, Annalise Dodds, and it's bye from Mickey, from me, from Simon, from Declan, Jenny and Ian. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye for now. See you next week.